Tractor engine hours. It's a subject that has always interested me, and I suspect it's something you have an interest in too. When I was in my teens, my uncle worked for an agricultural contractor, and he used to say 10,000 hours on a tractor was the equivalent to 100,000 miles on a car, which is a pretty interesting sort of rule of thumb. How accurate it is open to a little bit of debate. But it's one of these things that got me thinking about engine hours early on. Another thing that got me thinking about engine hours was, on a number of occasions, I'd see a tractor with like 2,500, 3,000 hours on, and effectively it was scrap. It was at the end of its life. And then when I worked in industry with forklift trucks and things, I'd see forklifts that worked round the clock on shifts, and they'd stack up tens of thousands of hours in like 3 or 4 years. It's quite an interesting topic. How important are engine hours anyway? It depends on the tractor, it depends on the way they've been used, it depends on the maintenance they've had. Some tractors, especially the older ones, are more durable because they were over-engineered. If you look at the big tractor pullers going up and down the circuit, they've got a big engine strapped to an axle of like a Forza Major or something that was way over-engineered at the time. You're never going to wear that kind of stuff out. And there's no electronics to go wrong. So that's all quite durable. Some tractors are real hard life, and they have very little maintenance, where other tractors are serviced regularly. That's obviously going to be a big factor. And of course it depends on the kind of work that they do. If there's a load of road work, then you're into tyres and steering joints. If it's PTO work, it's a different kind of wear. If you're pulling a plough all day long and similar things, there's all linkage wear and clutch and axle and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of different factors, not just the hours. When looking at engine hours, it's always wise to remember that the older tractors only had a 4-digit clock. So at 9,999, it would go back to 0 again. So sometimes you've got to count the hours plus the number of times that the clock's been over. It's also interesting how often hour clocks and rev counters break, because they're cable drive, the majority of them anyway, so it's understandable that they go at some point. But all these are factors. In this video, we're going to look at engine hours in more detail. And just to add to the mix and to give some comparison, I'm going to mix in some other machines like diggers and scissor lifts and stuff like that. I have also conducted an online survey, and I've asked some questions on social media, and I'll give you some highlights from what I found from that. Also, we're going to look at the Fendt tractors. They're very well known for being capable of high hours, so I'll give you some figures of some of those from Classic Tractor magazine. At the end of this video, I will conclude with some thoughts of my own, share some things with you that I've learned, and I'm also going to share with you a tractor that's got the highest hours that I've ever seen. But the interesting thing is, it's not one of the makes you would normally associate with durability and high engine hours. So if you don't know the answer to this already, I think you'll be very interested to know which tractor has clocked up the most hours from my research. down to an auction, so let's check out the hours on all kinds of different machines, see what we find. Now I'm going to share with you some of my findings from the online survey that I have conducted and some of the questions I've asked on social media. Now many tractor models are known by a number, so I'm going to give the model first, followed by the hours, just to eliminate any confusion. Let's start with something small that we can all relate to, the Massey Ferguson 135. I got quite a mixture of clock readings back for this. First one was 4.8 thousand. 8,000 was another. Somebody else said they had two with over 8,500. There was one that had done 3,500, but it was on the second time round, so it's like 13,500 hours. Another one was 14,000 hours. Moving on to David Brown, again, the models are known by numbers. Numbers are the model first. David Brown 1190, 12,000 hours. David Brown 1410, 13,000 hours. David Brown 1690, 13,000 hours. An 885 working on a set of gang mowers, 13,000 hours. But the clock was broke 20 years ago, so it's done a lot more than that since. In Norway, a David Brown 1990, 16,000 hours. A David Brown 1412, 17,000 hours. A David Brown stroke case 1594, that's one of these, 22,000 hours. A David Brown 880, 26,000 hours. And then there's one, and he described it as a David Brown 950, puts in 1,000 hours a year on the saw bench and does summertime work around the farm. It's been on that farm for 20 years plus, so it's done a considerable number of hours. David Brown in Finland, a 990 model, done 26,000 hours. Leyland 255, around 13,000 hours, the owner said. A Leyland 245, 14,000 hours. A Leyland 384, 14,000 hours. A Leyland 384 bought from new, over 16,000 hours, the owner said. Good, strong, solid tractor, still going well. A Leyland 272, the owner says it's been around the clock 4 times. That's 40,000 hours. That is pretty impressive. Right, Ford and Fordson. A Ford 7610, 19,000 hours, an oil change every 100 hours. A Fordson Major, 22,000 hours. A Ford 4610, nice little small tractor, 24,000 hours. A Ford 5000, 25,000 hours. A Ford 7610, 28,000 hours.
a Ford 6810 30,000 hours, a Ford 9870 around 35,000 hours, a Ford 7840 35,000 hours, and we have a TW10 at 35,000 hours. John Deere. A John Deere 3640 20,000 hours, a John Deere unknown model 32, and a John Deere 2650 45,000 hours.
Fendt tractors are very well known for their high quality, durability and a reputation for high hours. Coincidentally, Classic Tractor magazine did a section on Fendts and their hours. There's about a dozen tractors in there with everything from like 13,000 hours to one that topped out at 26,500 hours. But I suspect there's Fendts out there with even more hours than that.
In the Leyland tractors that I mentioned earlier, there was one that I've saved till the very end. High hours are not the sole domain of certain tractor makes. British Leyland, their tractors, some of them have done some amazingly high hours. There's a Leyland 270 which is claimed to have done 62,000 hours. It spent, I believe, all of its life on a hedge cutter, or pretty much all of it. And you don't have to take my word for it. It's on the front cover of Classic Tractor magazine, January 2021. Check that out.
So, some conclusions. First of all, did you spot that little yellow scissor lift at the start? A 1990 machine, 25 years old at this point in time, and it's only done a very small number of hours. I think the reason for that, with that type of machine, is the hour clock only records hours when the hydraulic pump is operating, because everything's hydraulic drive on that. So when it's stood in position, changing something in the ceiling, repairing something, it's not actually clocking up hours. So I think that's why the hours are so low on those kind of things. But one thing's for certain, of all the tractors I've looked at here, and all the tractors still out there, those hour clocks are still running, those tractors are still working. Some of these tractors, if you roll forward 10, 20, 30 years time, the hour readings are going to be really, really impressive.